The Binge, the great food adventure from Ukraine to America with numerous detours. Written by Maria Kay, narrated by Shannon Riddle.
Chapter 1. The First Supper. The first meal I had in the United States was an omelet. This place may as well have been somewhere tropical. Odessa, or Yevpatoria, or Sochi. The setting sun had lost its shape in the stifling air and brought on thoughts of Salvador Dali's melting clocks. It definitely felt hot enough to melt a clock. The tall, mature magnolias in full bloom would not have been out of place on the streets of Batumi or Dagomis. Their fragrance made the already soupy air even less breathable. The first hit of the hot, still conglomeration of oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, local pollutants, and gelatin almost made me run back into the airplane, whose air, after an 11-hour transatlantic flight, was nearly as sour, but at least 20 degrees cooler. Then I remembered throwing up somewhere halfway across the ocean, and the temptation passed. Once we were herded into the waiting area, gathered up by our exchange program guides, and loaded onto buses, the similarities with any place I had ever known vanished. As a Ukrainian version of Dorothy would say, we were not in Odessa anymore, and not in Sochi, as tropical as it felt. This was Reagan International Airport, Washington, D.C., on August 31st, 1994. Exchange program was really a misnomer. When they first became popular, the programs included real exchange. For every group traveling one way to spend a year in one country, there was another group traveling in the opposite direction for the same duration. By the time I became a member of an exchange program, the Soviet Union had fallen apart, and most of its pieces destabilized to a point where no sensible American, French, English, or German parent would feel brave enough to send their kids there. The programs continued as a slow but steady brain drip from the former Soviet East to the civilized West. The famous sights sailed by the bus window, the Capitol, the Washington Monument. I was torn between wanting to take it all in and feeling like a moron due to being the only kid without a camera. The sights won as they were better for the soul and provided distraction for the body, still shaken up after that bit of air sickness over the Atlantic. Over the years spent in the United States, I was asked many times about the culture shock. Did I experience it? What brought it on? How bad was it? To be honest, the culture shock was not anything grand or sudden. In fact, the culture shock was not very shocking. During the ride from the airport to the hotel, the driver was instructed to give us a bit of a tour, as many of us had to fly to our final destinations the next morning, and we certainly appreciated the views of the great city. But we were not awed by them. Not only had we seen them countless times in books, magazines, TV reports, and exchange program orientation videos, we were also spoiled by the experiences we've had in other large cities we knew. Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kiev, Tbilisi, Kishinev, Minsk. Not only were they just as big, they were significantly older, so anything less than 2 or 3 centuries of age was practically new and not nearly as impressive. The bus we were riding, however, now that is something. The slick, gleaming little box on wheels with huge, beautiful tinted windows, all of which were whole and clean and nothing like the large, soot-covered orange jobs we were accustomed to seeing on our streets. Its doors slid out and over like something out of a science fiction movie, and the entire thing was quiet and comfortable. So, while the sights of the American capital failed to bring on the culture shock, the bus most certainly delivered. We pulled up to the Howard Johnsons squished between 2 old-fashioned buildings. I honestly cannot remember where it was. The only Howard Johnson I was able to find many years later was on New York Avenue and did not look anything like the one where we stayed that first night in the States. I had never stayed at a hotel before, as the regular Soviet hotels were not suitable for human habitation. You had to pay extra to have hot water turned on in your room. It was considered deluxe service. And the luxury hotels with hot water, electricity, and other luxuries may as well have existed in another universe. Once, when my dad and I visited Dagomis, a popular tropical resort in the vicinity of Sochi, Russia, the friend we stayed with used her connections to take us to dinner at the luxury hotel, also called Dagomis. It sat next to an equally upscale hotel called the Olympian. The former was a place frequented by celebrities, and the latter was reserved for famous athletes. The 2 hotels formed an enclave high up on a hill, surrounded by luxurious gardens with pristine turquoise pools scattered here and there, an elegant soaring granite walkway to the beach, and a walled-off stretch of the finest beachfront, all of it surrounded by a stone wall with wrought-iron gates guarded by a police unit 24/7. What we ate or drank at Dagomis that evening is more than I can recall, because I went into a full sensory overload from my impossibly gorgeous surroundings.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?